Welcome back to Racing Rundown here on YouTube. I'm Eric DeCoster. In this preview, we'll be taking a look at the Grade 1 Mar Futurity, one of the premier 2-year-old Grade 1s of the year, especially on the West Coast. Excellent field lined up this year, a big field. Group of 9 will go postward here, some stakes winners, some nice maiden winners showing up here, and a couple maidens even who probably have bright futures, just maybe not in this spot either way. Really exciting race to dive into. Certainly will be marking them, whoever wins this race will be marking themselves as the best 2-year-old colt on the West Coast, and of course have a good chance come Breeders' Cup time a few months from now. It's really sneaking up now. I'm sure we might even see some of these runners point to the American Pharoah next month at Santa Anita. But an exciting bunch. Let's dive into it, starting with the one from the rail, Classical Cat. An interesting one, given who we beat last time out. That was Hijazi, the multi-million-dollar 2-year-old seller to Bob Baffert. Was a heavy favorite that day. Classical Cat comes out at 5-1. So it's a perfect stalking trip. Makes his move when he needs to. Draws off and holds that big favorite off and posts some strong figures in the process. It was a very strong effort from this son of Mendelssohn. Can't help but be impressed with what he can do. And I think a big thing with him is he won that going 5.5 furlongs. But physically, and when you look at his pedigree as well, he's one you think is going to like more distance. So 7 furlongs, second time out, certainly puts him in a good position. And you also have to like him because he's adaptable. He's going to be able to sit a really nice trip inside of the couple favorites who also are likely going to be the speed of the race. And if he can do that, he's going to put himself in excellent position to run a strong one here. I think he's got an excellent chance to run well. He's not going to be my winner in this spot, but I think he's certainly one you need to use on tickets, especially if you're going to be playing some exotics in this one. The 2 is Agency for Mark Glatt. Another one I think has a solid chance to pick up some late pieces. I'll touch on that a little bit more in a second. But this is a very nice colt for Glatt, a son of Bolt Oro, $400,000 2-year-old in training, who broke his maiden very nicely at Santa Anita back in June. One of those early maiden races going 5 furlongs. But he came from off the pace, and usually those races can be whoever breaks on top and is able to hold long usually wins. But to show that adaptability, come from off the pace, especially if you go back and watch the replay, this is a horse who broke terribly, but he still made up all the ground and won in really impressive fashion. So I think Agency's got a lot of good promise on that front, because then he backed it up in the Best Pal, the Grade 3 last time out, which a couple of these exit. Made a good wide move, once again coming from slightly off the pace, came along well to run second. And he wasn't ever going to be Havnameltdown, who we'll of course touch on in a few horses, but I loved how well he finished up. And when you look at this horse's pedigree, it just suggests more and more ground. That's what he wants. And Mark Glatt himself in interviews has even said, this is a horse I think needs more distance, and that's obviously another big plus. So he gets that. He gets another furlong added on here. I just question if he can beat these horses in these circumstances, but I think as long as, granted he runs well here, he's one I'm absolutely going to like going forward when these races start to get longer, like the American Pharoah, and then maybe even more so the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So exciting horse here. I think he's a good prospect. I think he's another one you got to use underneath in some senses, because he's going to come running. I think he just might run out of ground late, but he's certainly an intriguing one, working well into this spot, and he's already put together 2 very strong efforts. 3 is one of those maidens I mentioned at the top of the episode, Mixto, for Doug O'Neill, Calumet Farm. They'll take a shot here with this Son of Good Magic, a horse who had troubles in his first start, which was literally just 8 days, about a week actually, before this race will be run on September 3rd at Del Mar. Missed the break entirely, and then looked very uncomfortable down the backstretch, but he made a good late move. He was picking off horses late. The top 3 in here kind of dominated, but he gained well, and he actually wasn't that too far off of 3rd place. It was only a half length, so you have to be really encouraged by that. But coming back in a week, not facing winners, we really don't know what those horses in front of him were. He was also 61-1 that day, so not a ton suggesting. I mean, he picked up well. Seems like there's some decent amounts of speed in this race, so that benefits him. There's certain things that certainly benefit him, but nothing jumps out to suggest he can beat even a horse like an Agency or Classical Cat, who are going to be those, second-tier horses in the wagering. They all have better circumstances to beat him from off the pace than Mixto, so would be a very big surprise, but he might have some angles. The 4 is Skinner, another one who's a maiden. Kind of very similar story here. Didn't break on debut, lost a lot of ground early on, looked uncomfortable, but finished up nicely. He was beating 7 lengths, so that's not encouraging, but he was also a big price in there. He's one that absolutely wants more ground on top of all that. We know John Sheriff's to debut horses who are probably big rowdy types in short sprints, and that's exactly what Skinner did here, but just another one. I don't think he's got much of a shot at giving that first run. And I think of these two maidens who missed the board in their last efforts, I think Mixto is probably the better. So if for some reason you are looking that way, I think Skinner is certainly the least attractive of those options. Pop de Oro is the 5, a horse who, an Arizona bred, so me being Arizona myself, I'm always good to see that, but this is a horse who struggled at the stakes level to make an impact. He's been there and he's ran well. I mean, 2/4 in the Phasic Futurity, which was a 9-horse field. He made up a lot of ground after a slow start. Kind of the same in the Best Pal, but he was never winning either of those races. And, of course, Agency, who we already touched on, returns. Havnameltdown, who we'll get to still in a little bit, also returns. Just one where he's had his excuses. I mean, he hasn't gotten out of the gate, and that's a huge negative for any horse, and this guy especially, because it's really cost him a couple lengths when it was all said and done in those last 2 efforts. But where does that change? Do the blinkers coming on like they do in this spot, does that really move him forward? Probably not enough. I mean, he's been consistent, he's been good, but the waters get even deeper here, and he's already kind of been beating up on himself, and I just don't see why that changes. Nice horse, but he seems like a project at the moment. 6 is Newgate, streak of 3 Bob Baffert trainees in the starting gate begin here with the 6, Newgate. He's owned by that big ownership group that own just about every Bob Baffert horse nowadays, and well-bred. He's buying to Mischief out of Majestic Presence and $850,000 yearling. He's what you'd consider the entire package on paper, and then he comes out and wins by 3.5 on debut. Very nice win on July 30th at Del Mar. He's had an excellent trip, just pressing the leader from the inside, and then or from the outside, I should say, and pressing the leader to his inside, and then took over around the turn, drew off 3.5 comfortable victory. Working well since that win, like all Bob Bafferts do. Just a nice horse. I mean, he's certainly put it together, and from what I'd been hearing, he was one of the more highly regarded from this barn heading into the summer at Del Mar. He put it all together first time out. I think he's got a chance, but I will say, I'm just going to lead right into the 7, Cave Rock, his stablemate, who certainly looks like the standout based off that first run. Went straight to the front, never looked back, and won by 6 lengths very comfortably under Juan Hernandez, posting big numbers. I don't have comparisons to the rest of the crop, but I'm sure the numbers I'm looking at suggest one of the better, if not the best, on paper from this entire crop. And sure, you go from maidens to winners, but when you win that nicely, it was another almost 10 lengths back to third. So this is a quality animal. Son of Arrogate, $550,000 yearling seller at Keeneland September, and he just looks so good. And he did it going 6.5, so you know that the extra 16th will be no problem for him. And he's another one. Distance is actually going to be his friend. So for him to win the way he did going 6.5, that just tells you all you really need to know about this horse. He has a lot of talent. He was entered in a race that times out perfectly to lead into this race. 4 weeks, excellent little break there to get to this point. It's not like it was a little long like Newgate's. Newgate's ran very early on in the meet, and now he's running at the end in this whole 8-week meet these days. So not a layoff per se, but some considerable time between your first and second start, whereas Cave Rock, he gets some excellent timing into this one. Get some good maintenance works to get him keep him fresh for this spot. He looks like an absolute standout in what is still a tough field, but the way he's done it in that first start, you can't help but like him. The 8, Havnameltdown, last of the 3 Bafferts. This one to be ridden by Mike Smith, also owned by Mike Pegram and Company. A nice horse. You can't not be if you're a graded stakes winner, right? You won the Best Pal last time out. He's 2 for 2. Both wins actually coming at the Del Mar meet. One opening weekend and Best Pal 3 weeks later. And the Best Pal, he really did take a step forward. I mean, his maiden win was nice. He just got into the lead, never looked back under Florent Giroux. Then next time out, Best Pal under Juan Hernandez. Actually got trapped out a little bit wide. He broke from the 10-hole, and yet he still fought along with speed to his inside, shrugged them all off, and put together a pretty convincing win. It was 2.5 more to Agency, who was looking for the more ground, and then it was a pretty hefty break, I believe, 8-ish lengths back to third place. So, I mean, these two separated themselves and Havnameltdown. The thing about Havnameltdown, though, very nice horse, but I think he's a pure sprinter. And you look at the pedigree, uncaptured, really just throws these nice sprinty types, and the dam side's kind of more of the same. He's a really nice horse. He's a horse I think can be an excellent sprinter. But I don't think 7 furlongs is his A game, especially when he's going to have to deal with Cave Rock and Newgate, among others, right? I mean, there's some really nice horses in here. And if we go back to Agency again, even with that extra furlong, is he all that better? Is Havnameltdown all that better than that colt? Or is he all that better than Classical Cat, who won one of the tougher maiden races at the meet? Just a really nice horse, just in these circumstances. I don't know if it's his race to win. So he could prove me wrong, but I just think even of his stablemates, he's probably the least likely to win, despite having the best CV. And then there's some others in here that also have good merit for them heading into this 7 furlong race. And we'll finish up with the 9, the Big Wham, the Washington bred. We got a diverse bunch in here. You got Bob Baffert with the Florida bred. You got the Arizona bred, Pop de Oro. And here we got a Washington bred, California sired colt here in the Big Wham. Son of Mr. Big, that got him eligible for these 2 state bred or sired races he's won at the meet so far. So he's another one who actually has really good Del Mar affinity. Broke his maidens, had a good little stalking trip to win by a half length that day. The horse he beat in their Kangaroo Court, he unfortunately scratched from the stakes race today that for 2-year-old Cowbreds, where he would have been a big favorite. But nevertheless, that's a really nice one. But the Big Wham beats him there, and then comes out in the next start, wins the graduation, another Cowbred stakes here, or a Cowbred stakes, another Cowbred race in general for him to win. So 2 for 2 at the meet. Needs to add a little bit more ground. He's only gone 5.5 to this point in his career, but I really don't think it's that big of an issue. I think one that's probably more of a one-turn type, but 7 furlongs is going to hit him right between the eyes. And in addition to all that, he's tactical. He likes to actually come from about mid-pack, and that's going to be a big asset. If we dive into the pace scenario here, it looks like the 2 Bafferts are the speeds of the speed. I think Havnameltdown, being that sprinter that he is, in my eyes at least, will have a little bit more early gun than Cave Rock, but I think those will be 1-2, and then you'll have Newgate trying to stalk him, as well as Classical Cat from the inside. So it's probably going to be 2x2 in my eyes up the backstretch. And then right in behind them, you'll have, your agencies, and the Big Wham will fall in that 5th and 6th, next 2x2, but probably a handful of lengths off the lead. And those other 3 long shots, I imagine, will be out the back because none of them want to get out of the gate. But that puts the Big Wham in an excellent spot. I think if those 2 maybe catch themselves not really being these young 2-year-olds, if they kind of catch themselves knocking heads early on, that could set up well for the Big Wham. I mean, does he have to get better? Yeah, because his figures, I mean, they've been well, but his wins have come against Cowbreds, and now we come into this tough open company. It's certainly a different ballgame. That being said, very early on in the year, albeit, he was running in open races. The Keeneland Baby race, he ran a really good second behind a nice colt of Wesley Ward's named No Nay Hudson, who's stakes placed since. And then he was second in the Kentucky Juvenile, which was a big 12-horse field. Once again, not really quality because it was early baby races. We know what those can be. But he ran well in both and then backed it up coming out to Del Mar and running big races here. And he fits well on numbers as a result of that. And he's really just behind Havnameltdown and Cave Rock, when you add it all up. So he's absolutely a player at a price. Not my cup of tea in here, but absolutely could see why someone would go with him. So after laying it all out, it's probably pretty obvious who I think is winning this one. It's Cave Rock. Just looks like the goods. Another good 2-year-old for Bob Baffert. A horse who's going to relish another 16th of a mile. A horse who won so nicely. They never regress, these Bafferts do. So I think that Cave Rock is your winner. But I think underneath the value absolutely comes from the 2 and the 1, Agency and Classical Cat. That's how I'd round out a try with these 3. 2 coming off of strong efforts over the surface. 2 I think are going to run big races, just not be able to match the talent that Cave Rock has at this point in his career. So it's obviously a very good field. There's a lot of opinions, I think, to be had with this bunch, and I really can't fault you for picking 2/3 of the field. It's a very fun bunch. Horses, I think, will make a good impact on the national 2-year-old scene come November. So have fun. Good luck if you're playing it, and we'll see you next time here on Racing Rundown.